There's a strange kind of silence that comes after you throw something away, not just the absence of noise, but the absence of weight. And for some people, that silence feels safer than anything they've ever known. You've probably noticed it, how certain people don't just clean their spaces, they purge them. Closets become emptier, drawers become lighter, rooms begin to echo. And while others see minimalism as a trend, for them, it feels like survival. Because clutter isn't just mess, it's memory, it's pressure, it's a quiet reminder of everything they couldn't control. And maybe that's where it starts. Not in adulthood, not in a random burst of motivation, but somewhere much earlier, where control was fragile, unpredictable, or completely absent. A childhood where emotions piled up like unopened boxes. Where words weren't spoken, only swallowed. Where chaos wasn't something you cleaned, it was something you lived inside. Psychologists sometimes call it emotional overflow. When a child experiences too many unresolved feelings, fear, neglect, confusion, they don't disappear. They stay. Quietly, patiently. And over time, they start looking for an exit. For some, that exit becomes perfectionism. For others, people-pleasing. But for decluttering lovers, it becomes the removal. A need to strip life down to something simpler, quieter, safer. Because when your inner world feels like a storm, your outer world becomes the only place you can create calm. Think about it like an invisible wall. Growing up, you may have learned that emotions weren't safe to express. Maybe they were ignored. Maybe they were too overwhelming for the people around you. So instead of processing them, you built a wall, one that kept things contained. But walls don't just block pain, they also block connection. And over time, that trapped energy has to go somewhere. So it moves into your environment. Every object becomes a decision. Every item carries a subtle emotional weight. And without realizing it, your brain starts associating less with relief. Fewer things to manage, fewer reminders, fewer chances to feel overwhelmed again. It's not really about the objects, it's about what they represent. A cluttered room can feel like a replay of emotional chaos. Too much happening at once. Too many unfinished thoughts. Too many invisible demands. And when you start removing things, organizing, simplifying, it creates something your mind has been craving for years: clarity. Control. But here's the part most people don't see. This isn't just a habit. It's a coping mechanism shaped by something called micro-trauma. Not the kind that's obvious or dramatic, but the quiet, repeated moments where your needs weren't fully met. Where you had to adjust yourself just to keep things stable. Moments like being told to calm down instead of being understood, feeling like your emotions were too much, learning that peace only existed when everything was just right, so you adapted. You learned to create that rightness yourself, and over time, that adaptation turned into identity. You became the one who organizes, who clears, who resets, the one who finds comfort in empty surfaces and neatly folded corners. Because in a world that once felt unpredictable, this is something you can control, but control has a quiet cost. Because when you rely on external order to feel internal peace, it becomes fragile, temporary, like trying to hold water in your hands. The moment something shifts, a messy day, an unexpected change, that calm starts slipping away, and suddenly the urge comes back stronger. Clean it, fix it, remove it, not because you want to, but because you feel like you have to. It's almost like emotional erosion. Slowly over time, the deeper feelings, grief, anger, confusion, get worn down, not by healing, but by avoidance. By replacing emotional processing with physical action. And here's where it gets even deeper. Decluttering isn't just about removing things. It's also about protecting yourself from attachment. Because attachment can hurt. Every object you keep has a story. A memory, a connection to a version of you that existed at a certain time. And if your past holds unresolved pain, holding onto those objects can feel like holding onto the pain itself. So you let go, again and again, not just of things but sometimes of pieces of your own history. It creates this quiet paradox. You crave peace, but you also distance yourself from the very things that make life feel full. You simplify your surroundings, but sometimes you unintentionally simplify your emotional world too. Fewer attachments, fewer risks, fewer chances to feel overwhelmed, but also fewer chances to feel deeply connected. And maybe, if you're honest with yourself, there are moments, small, almost unnoticeable, where the emptiness doesn't feel peaceful, it feels lonely. Like standing in a perfectly clean room and realizing something is missing, but you can't quite name what it is, because it was never really about the objects in the first place. It was about what you were trying to escape. And what you were trying to rebuild. The mind is incredibly intelligent. It finds ways to survive, even in environments that feel emotionally unsafe. And for decluttering lovers, this behavior wasn't random, it was a solution. A quiet, consistent way to create order where there once was none. A way to breathe. A way to feel okay, even if just for a moment. But somewhere along the way, the solution became a pattern. And the pattern became a dependency, and now, it's hard to tell where the need for peace ends and the fear of chaos begins. Because what happens when there's nothing left to remove? But the feeling is still there. What happens when the room is clean? But your mind isn't. That's the moment most people try to avoid. The moment where silence stops being comforting and starts becoming revealing. Because beneath the surface of control, beneath the perfectly arranged spaces and the carefully chosen simplicity, there's something waiting to be seen. Not judged, not fixed, just understood. And maybe that's the real reason this pattern exists in the first place. Because a part of you is still trying to be heard. And when it isn't, it finds quieter ways to speak. It shows up in the way your chest tightens when things feel too much. In the subtle discomfort of a room that isn't perfectly in place. In that almost automatic urge to reach for something, anything, you can fix, organize, or let go of, just to feel steady again. But over time, this comes with consequences that are easy to miss. Not loud, not obvious, just slowly accumulating. You begin to associate peace only with absence, as if calm can only exist when something is removed. When the space is empty enough, quiet enough, controlled enough. And without realizing it, life starts shrinking into something more manageable, but also more limited. Because real life isn't minimal. It's messy. It's layered. It's full of unfinished conversations, emotional clutter, unpredictable moments. And when your nervous system is trained to reject that kind of complexity, even beautiful things can start to feel overwhelming. Connection feels risky. Memories feel heavy. Even growth can feel like too much. So you return to what feels safe. You clean. You simplify. You reset. Again and again. But here's the quiet truth that most people don't talk about. You can't declutter your way out of emotions. You can move objects. Rearrange your environment. Create the illusion of control. But the feelings you've been carrying, they don't disappear. They just wait. Patiently. Beneath the surface. And eventually, they ask to be felt. Not solved. Not organized. Just acknowledged. This is where the shift begins. Not in doing more, but in doing something unfamiliar. Staying in a moment that feels slightly uncomfortable without rushing to fix it. Letting a messy thought exist without trying to clean it up. Allowing your space to be imperfect. And noticing that you're still okay. Because what you've been searching for in your environment is something your mind is slowly learning to create on its own. Safety. But real safety doesn't come from control. It comes from capacity. The ability to sit with your inner world without needing to escape it. And that's not something you were taught. So you're learning it now. Gently, piece by piece. It might look small at first. Leaving a drawer slightly disorganized and resisting the urge to fix it immediately. Holding onto an object, not because it's useful, but because it means something. Letting your room reflect a little bit of your inner complexity instead of hiding it. These aren't just actions, they're signals. Signals to your mind that say, I don't need to erase everything to feel okay. And slowly, something shifts. The same space that once felt overwhelming begins to feel human. Lived in. Real. Not perfect, but honest. And within that honesty, there's a different kind of peace, one that isn't dependent on everything being in place. A peace that can exist even when things aren't. You start to realize that decluttering was never the problem. It was the meaning behind it. The belief that less equals safer, that emptiness equals calm, that control equals stability. But healing isn't about removing everything that triggers you. It's about expanding your ability to stay with it, without losing yourself. And maybe, for the first time, you begin to see your past not as something you need to distance yourself from, but something you can gently hold, without it overwhelming you. Because those memories, those emotions, they're not clutter. They're parts of you that never got the space they needed. And now, you're giving it to them. Not by organizing them away, but by letting them exist. There's a quiet strength in that. A kind of courage that doesn't look like control, but feels like acceptance. And acceptance doesn't empty your life. It deepens it. So maybe the goal was never to have a perfectly clean space. Maybe it was to create a space, inside and outside, where you don't feel the need to run anymore. Where things can be a little messy, a little uncertain, a little unfinished, and you're still okay. Because peace isn't the absence of everything. It's the presence of yourself, fully, gently, without needing to remove parts of your experience just to make it bearable. And when you reach that point, something unexpected happens. You don't stop decluttering. You just stop using it to escape. You begin choosing what to keep, not from fear, but from meaning. Not from overwhelm, but from intention. And suddenly, your space becomes a reflection of who you are, not what you're trying to avoid. It becomes softer, warmer, more alive, just like you. So if you've been quietly wondering why letting go feels so necessary, why emptiness sometimes feels safer than fullness, maybe there's nothing wrong with you. Maybe you just learned to survive in a way that made sense at the time. And now, you're learning a new way to live, one where you don't have to keep removing pieces of your world to feel at peace. One where you can stay, and if this story felt like it was speaking directly to you, then maybe, in some quiet way, you're already beginning to understand yourself a little more than you did before, and that's where everything changes. Because understanding is where healing begins. And you don't have to do it alone.